You know, when you see a crime scene in a movie, there is always that definitive moment where the detective, ducks under the yellow police tape.
Right, the classic Hollywood shot.
Yeah, exactly. And that tape is there for a reason, you know. It separates the pristine, tightly controlled forensic reality of the investigation from the chaotic, speculating crowds standing on the sidewalk.
Absolutely, it's a physical boundary.
But today, because of the internet, that yellow tape essentially doesn't exist anymore. I mean, anyone with a Wi-Fi connection can just stroll right onto the crime scene, pick up a piece of evidence, and start broadcasting their own theory to millions of people.
That is such a good way to put it. The democratization of information has completely obliterated the traditional boundaries of a criminal investigation.
It really has.
We're no longer waiting for a jury to deliver a verdict after months of closed-door proceedings. The trial is happening in real time on social media. It's driven by influencers, alternative media, and massive, highly engaged audiences. And it is incredibly messy.
Messy doesn't even begin to cover it. I mean, it's a wild west out there.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, our mission is to break down one of the most surreal, high-stakes spectacles of the entire year.
It was definitely a spectacle.
We are looking at a $300,000 bare-knuckle intellectual brawl between conservative commentator Candace Owens and debate streamer Andrew Wilson.
Right.
And the core topic they were arguing over, the real-life assassination of Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. Specifically, they are debating whether the prime suspect in custody, Tyler Robinson, is a lone wolf killer, or if he is, just a patsy in a sprawling, multi-layered conspiracy.
And just to establish the baseline of how we are approaching this, because we need to be careful, we are synthesizing an enormous amount of raw material today.
Oh, yeah. So much tape.
We have the live 3.5-hour broadcast of the debate itself, which was moderated by Patrick Bet-David. We've got the behind-the-scenes audio from Candace Owens' own post-debate breakdown.
Which was eye-opening, very much so. And, most importantly, we are pulling directly from the actual court TV transcripts of the preliminary hearings in Utah versus Tyler Robinson.
Right.
We are literally comparing the internet theater to the actual legal docket.
And before we get into the blood and guts of the arguments, we have to throw up a massive impartiality disclaimer for you guys listening. We're talking about a real national tragedy.
Yes, the assassination of a major political figure.
Exactly. And the theories that were hurled across the table in this debate involve everything from foreign government intelligence agencies to institutional cover-ups and just extreme political polarization.
It gets really deep in the weeds.
It does. So let me be 100% clear. We are not taking sides. Not on the left, not on the right, not on the official narrative, and not on the conspiracy theories.
We're just the tape review guys.
Right. Our job today is to act strictly as the tape review guys. We are here to unpack the forensic facts presented, the mechanics of how these two individuals argued their cases, and to understand how this wild clash of egos actually went down.
Because we really are analyzing the architecture of the arguments and the environment they were delivered in. The environment itself, the paranoia, the stakes, the sheer hostility dictated the terms of the entire exchange.
So let's start right there. We have to set the stage. Because you cannot understand the arguments without understanding the insane pressure cooker environment they were forged in.
It was definitely not a polite panel discussion at a university.
Not even close. This whole thing started when Andrew Wilson, who runs a platform called The Crucible, basically threw down a $300,000 bounty.
Yeah, just an astronomical amount of money to put on the table for a podcast debate.
Crazy money. He challenged Candace to debate the facts of the Kirk assassination, and he originally wanted it on Joe Rogan's turf down in Texas.
Which is a very specific tactical move. For those who aren't familiar with Andrew Wilson, he operates in this very aggressive debate bro sector of the internet.
Very confrontational.
Highly confrontational. It's a culture built on platform fighting, rapid-fire arguments, and trying to score rhetorical knockouts. By offering a massive sum of money and trying to move the venue to Texas, which is basically the epicenter of modern independent media, he was trying to pull Candace Owens out of her established element.
But Candace is not exactly someone who gets easily bullied into a venue change, right?
No, definitely not.
She's an investigative firebrand with a massive dedicated following. And, she was pregnant at the time.
Right, which adds a whole other layer to the logistics.
So she flat out refuses. She basically calls him an ankle biter and says, look, I'm not traveling across the country for this. You want to debate me, you come to my house. She insisted it happen at her home studio in Nashville.
It was a fascinating power play. She forces the challenger to come to her fortress.
Yeah, her literal house.
But Wilson, in classic internet native fashion, refuses to just hash out the details via a private email chain. He insists on negotiating the terms of this debate publicly on X.
Which is so unhinged. Usually when you are putting together a media event with $250,000 on the line, you have lawyers talking to lawyers in quiet rooms.
Exactly.
But he wants it all in the public square. Why do you think he did that?
Well, it's performative transparency. In the debate streamer ecosystem, the negotiation itself is part of the content.
Ah, so it's all for the engagement.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He wants his audience to see every demand, every concession, every perceived slight in real time. He wants to frame himself as the fearless challenger, pushing the established media figure into a corner.
It's like a boxing weigh-in, where the fighters are screaming at each other over the brand of the folding chairs in the corner, but they are doing it with a megaphone to millions of followers.
That's a perfect analogy.
And it just ratcheted up the tension, because once they finally did take it off Twitter and into email, the paranoia just went into overdrive. Candace's team starts getting these emails from the Crucible team, but it's a totally faceless chain.
Right. No actual names.
No one is signing their names. They are just demanding an escrow account for the $300,000.
And we really have to pause and appreciate the logistical nightmare of that demand. Finding a bank to approve and fast-track a $300,000 escrow account, getting all the legal frameworks in place, and doing it in a matter of days before a weekend is incredibly difficult.
It requires immense trust and coordination.
But there's zero trust. It's completely toxic.
Totally toxic. And then at 9:15 p.m., the night before the debate is supposed to happen, this faceless email chain suddenly hits Candace's team with a list of infrastructure demands.
Last-minute technical demands.
Yeah. They assume they can just roll into her house and set up a mini live stream desk. They want to run HDMI cables out of her studio.
This perfectly highlights the culture clash we were talking about. Candace Owens runs a very tight, highly controlled media operation out of her home. Her studio is actually a converted HVAC closet.
Which is tiny.
It is a tiny, intimate space. Her children are sleeping in the house. And then you have Wilson's team, who operate in this boundary-pushing, totally raw, streaming world, assuming they have the right to just turn her private residence into a broadcast hub.
And it gets crazier. Debate day arrives. The faceless email team finally shows up in person. And who does Andrew Wilson bring with him into Candace's house? Gerald Morgan.
The producer and CEO for Steven Crowder.
Which is the equivalent of throwing gasoline on an already burning bridge.
Literally.
For anyone who doesn't follow the inside baseball of conservative media, Steven Crowder and Candace Owens have a deeply documented, incredibly bitter history of online friction.
Yeah, it's very public and very ugly.
Candace essentially views Crowder's entire operation as a group of guys who just prank and mean tweet her. So she explicitly lays down a ground rule before they walk in. Absolutely no filming outside of the studio.
Yeah.
You are in my house, respect the boundaries.
And what happens?
Gerald Morgan allegedly goes into the area near Candace's kids' playroom and the garage and does a live call-in for Steven Crowder's show.
Right, from the playroom.
I mean, put yourself in her shoes. You are pregnant. You've got people you fundamentally distrust walking around your house, broadcasting from near where your kids play. How does that environment not completely poison the well before the first argument is even made?
It absolutely poisons it. If we connect this to the bigger picture of the debate itself, it establishes a hostile deposition tone.
Hostile deposition, yeah.
This wasn't two intellectuals sitting down by a fireplace to collaboratively seek the truth about a national tragedy. It was a blood sport.
Yeah.
You have political operatives trying to score viral clout from the host's private home. It ensures that both parties are operating entirely on the defensive, hypervigilant for traps.
And the paranoia just kept bleeding into the broadcast. I mean, once the cameras are rolling, Andrew Wilson's wife, Rachel, actually tweets out during the debate that Candace is wearing an earpiece and being fed answers by a whole team of people.
A claim that Candace quickly dismantled by pointing out the physical reality of her setup.
Right, because of the tech.
Exactly. The earpieces they were wearing were standard producer comms. They operate on a frequency that literally drops its signal 15 feet outside the control room.
So unless her shadow team was hiding in the hallway.
Right. The idea that a vast network of researchers was feeding her real-time counterarguments from across the country defies the basic physics of the hardware in the room.
So we have a $300,000 bounty, public trash talking, faceless emails, rival producers broadcasting from the playroom, and earpiece conspiracies.
And that's just the pre-show.
That's just the warm-up. The fighters are finally in the ring. The bell rings. Let's look at the actual core battleground. What exactly are they fighting over?
The central conflict is a clash of two very different epistemologies, basically two different ways of evaluating truth. Andrew Wilson is firmly planted in the state's official narrative, the one currently being argued in the preliminary hearings in Utah.
Okay.
Candace Owens is representing the alternative theory, which questions the institutional narrative and points toward a massive coordinated psychological operation, or PSYOP.
Let's unpack Wilson's side first, because he came in swinging with the hard forensic data. He argues that the evidence against Tyler Robinson is, quote, overwhelming.
He was very confident.
Very. He says there is no doubt this guy is the lone shooter. And to back that up, he goes straight to the DNA evidence presented in the court transcripts.
Right. According to the forensic biology test, specifically Exhibits 1.1 through 1.6 and Exhibit 33 from the court TV records, Tyler Robinson's DNA was found as a major component on the murder weapon.
A rifle. Right.
Yes. We're talking about a rifle found near the scene. His DNA was on the stock, the grips, the trigger, the butt plate, the bolt, and the unspent cartridges. They also found his DNA on a Dremel tool at his residence.
Okay, stop right there, because I want to make sure I really understand this part. When the forensic biologist testified, they said the DNA profile is at least 1 trillion times more likely to have originated from Tyler Robinson than an unknown individual.
That's the state's claim, yes.
1 trillion times. I mean, that sounds like an insurmountable number. How does a lab even get to 1 trillion?
It's essentially the statistical ceiling for forensic biology. When they sequence the DNA markers found on the gun and compare them to a swab taken from the suspect, they run it through a population database.
Right.
A 1 trillion times likelihood is the laboratory's way of stating a mathematical certainty. They cap it at 1 trillion because, frankly, the global population is only 8 billion.
Oh, wow. Okay. So they literally can't go higher because there aren't enough people on Earth.
Exactly. It is their definitive way of saying to the court, this is his DNA. And Wilson leans into this heavily. He's arguing that you have a suspect, you have a murder weapon, and you have mathematically certain DNA linking the suspect's hands to the most crucial operational parts of that weapon.
The trigger, the bolt, the grips.
Right. Add the Dremel tool found at his house, which implies he was modifying the weapon or the ammunition beforehand, and Wilson says the physical chain of evidence is unbreakable.
It's a compelling argument, honestly. But Wilson doesn't stop at the DNA. He moves on to the confessions, the paper trail. He brings up Exhibit 16.1, which is a text message thread between Tyler Robinson and his partner, Lance Twiggs.
And this happens on September 11th, the very day after the assassination.
Yes. Agent Davis testified about this exchange. Tyler texts Lance, quote, drop what you're doing, look under your keyboard.
Which is very dramatic.
It's like dialogue ripped straight out of a Bourne movie. And then a subsequent text says, if any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent. My lawyer should be Doug Terry.
And what was under the keyboard?
Right. A handwritten note from Tyler, which the state then entered into evidence. So when you combine a 1 trillion to 1 DNA match with a text message explicitly telling someone to find a hidden note and refuse to speak to the police, I mean, it paints a very guilty picture.
And then Wilson layers in the state's proposed motive. The prosecution isn't just charging Robinson with murder, they're pursuing a victim targeting enhancement.
Explain that mechanism for us. What does a victim targeting enhancement actually do legally?
It's an aggravating factor. The state is arguing that Tyler Robinson didn't just kill Charlie Kirk randomly. He specifically hunted and targeted Kirk based on Kirk's protected political expressions and his Orthodox Christian views regarding gender and sexuality.
Ah, so it makes it a hate crime, essentially.
Similar concept, yes. To establish this, the prosecution brought in an affidavit from David Engelhardt, an attorney and pastor heavily affiliated with Turning Point USA.
Okay, and what did that affidavit say?
Engelhardt outlined Kirk's public platform and beliefs. The state uses this to argue that Robinson, who vehemently opposed those views, was ideologically motivated to commit the assassination. It elevates the severity of the crime in the eyes of the court.
Got it. So you've got the weapon, the DNA, the panicked texts, the ideological motive, and then finally, Wilson points to the CCTV footage. Agent Hull testified that law enforcement tracked a suspect wearing a dark baseball cap, a maroon shirt, jeans, and Converse sneakers, moving across the Utah Valley University campus 4 separate times on the day of the shooting.
So Wilson looks at this entire package and says, what is there to debate? The evidence is overwhelming. He did it.
Right. But this is where the debate takes a massive turn, and where Candace Owens systematically attempts to deconstruct Wilson's certainty. Her overarching position is that there is a 0% chance Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk with the weapon the state claims he used.
0%.
Zero. She didn't say, like, I have some doubts or maybe there's a second shooter. She said 0% chance that specific gun fired the fatal shot. And her argument hinges on the ballistics and the physics of the human body.
Right, she goes deep into the ballistics.
The state claims the weapon used a .30-06 frangible Remington core-locked bullet.
Which is a highly specific, devastating piece of ammunition.
Right. Candace argues that if you look at the medical examiner's summary of the neck wound, it completely defies the physics of what a .30-06 round does upon impact.
A .30-06 is a high-velocity, heavy-caliber rifle round, traditionally used for hunting large game. Candace's argument is rooted in the kinetic energy transfer.
Break that down for us. What does that mean for the human body?
If a bullet of that size and velocity strikes a human neck, the hydrostatic shock and the physical tissue displacement would be catastrophic. It would likely result in near decapitation or massive uncontainable structural failure of the neck.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly grim.
It is. She argues that the relatively contained wound described in the official medical summary simply does not align with the ballistic reality of a .30-06.
And Wilson tried to push back on this, right? He argued that a frangible bullet is designed to split apart upon impact, which mitigates overpenetration.
He did, but Candace held her ground. She argued that even a frangible .30-06 carries so much kinetic energy that the initial impact trauma would still vastly exceed the medical examiner's description.
She is essentially arguing that the physical evidence of the body contradicts the physical evidence of the weapon the state provided.
Exactly. It's a very technical counter-argument.
That's a deep forensic weed to get into. But her most brilliant maneuver, the absolute highlight of her legal argument, was when she brought up Utah Rule 1102.
Yes, the reliable hearsay rule. This was a masterstroke of debate preparation.
It really was.
She used it to completely defang Wilson's reliance on the preliminary hearing transcripts.
Let's really break this down, because I think a lot of people watching court TV or following true crime on the internet completely misunderstand how the system works. Candace points out that a preliminary hearing is not a trial.
That's a huge distinction.
The jury isn't there. The standard is not beyond a reasonable doubt. The standard is just probable cause. Basically, is it more likely than not that a crime happened and this guy might be involved?
Exactly. And because the burden of proof is so low at a preliminary hearing, Utah Rule 1102 allows the state to present reliable hearsay.
Which wouldn't fly in a real trial, right?
Exactly. In a normal trial, if you want to enter a fact into evidence, you have to put the primary witness on the stand so they can be cross-examined by the defense. But under Rule 1102, a police agent can sit on the stand and say, my partner interviewed a witness, and that witness said he saw the suspect. The defense can't cross-examine the actual witness yet.
So Candace flips this on Wilson. She says, you keep demanding positive evidence, but you are treating the state's inferences, which are legally permitted as hearsay right now, as immutable facts.
And she brings up the CCTV footage as the prime example of this.
Yes. Agent Hall tracks this guy in a maroon shirt, but later he tracks a guy in a black shirt. The defense attorney asks Agent Hall, how do you know the guy in the maroon shirt is the same guy in the black shirt? And Hall's answer is, they were both wearing Converse sneakers.
And Candace rightfully attacks the absurdity of this. She points out that they are on a college campus, Utah Valley University.
Right, it's a massive school.
You could probably find 1,000 young men wearing Converse sneakers and jeans on a college campus on any given Tuesday. To identify a suspect in a capital murder case solely by matching his shoe brand is an investigative inference.
It's a huge leap.
It is acceptable for establishing probable cause under Rule 1102, but it is deeply flawed if you are presenting it to the public as overwhelming, undeniable evidence, which is what Wilson was doing.
It's like someone reading the pitch for a movie and acting like they've seen the entire film. And she applies this exact same skepticism to the DNA evidence. Wilson is pounding the table about this 1 trillion times match. But Candace actually read the cross-examination of the FBI forensics analyst.
This is where the state's neat narrative gets very messy.
Very messy.
The analyst admitted on the stand that the sample taken from the trigger of the rifle didn't just have Tyler Robinson's DNA on it. It contained a mixture of DNA from 5 different people.
5 people on the trigger of a murder weapon.
Yeah.
And one of those people was Tyler's father, Matt Robinson. But here is the absolute kicker. Candace notes that out of those 5 DNA profiles, Tyler's prints were the most degraded.
Which is a profound anomaly in touch DNA analysis.
Walk us through why that matters so much. What does degraded actually mean in this forensic context?
Touch DNA relies on the shedding of epithelial cells, which are skin cells left behind when someone handles an object. Over time, or through environmental exposure, those cells degrade.
Okay, so older cells degrade more.
Right. If Tyler Robinson was the active shooter, meaning he was the very last person to aggressively handle a weapon, grip the stock, squeeze the trigger, and manage the recoil, his DNA should theoretically be the freshest, most abundant, and least degraded profile on those contact points.
Because he was the last one to touch it.
Exactly. But if his DNA is highly degraded compared to the 4 other people found on the weapon, it implies a disruption in the timeline.
Wow.
It supports Candace's theory that the gun was handled by several other individuals after Tyler last touched it. She uses this forensic anomaly to argue that the gun was a planted throwdown weapon, heavily handled by the actual perpetrators who left their fresher DNA over Tyler's older, degraded profile.
Man, when you lay it out like that, it makes the 1 trillion times statistic feel a lot less like a slam dunk and more like a carefully selected data point.
It definitely complicates the narrative.
And she pushes the timeline issue even further. She brings up the Penguich Steakhouse.
Yes, this was her alibi argument.
She claims that on the day of the assassination, Tyler Robinson wasn't even on the UVU campus. She says he drove hours away to a town called Penguich near where his grandparents lived to eat a steak.
Right.
She didn't just read this on a blog. She claims she personally spoke to the owner of the steakhouse, she reviewed the receipt, and she insists the geography makes it physically impossible for him to be the guy in the Converse sneakers on campus.
The geographical distance in Utah is vast. UVU is in Orem, and Penguich is about a 3-hour drive south. If he was provably eating at that steakhouse during a specific window, the state's timeline collapses.
And Wilson's reaction to this was wild. He demands that Candace call Visa and MasterCard to verify the merchant data on the receipt. He wants her to authenticate the bank routing numbers of a steakhouse.
It's incredible hypocrisy.
It really is. He's perfectly fine letting the state identify a killer by his Converse sneakers, but he demands Candace perform a forensic audit on a restaurant receipt.
It perfectly illustrates the confirmation bias at play. When the state provides evidence, Wilson accepts the lowest bar of probable cause. When Candace provides exculpatory evidence, Wilson demands an impossibly high standard of authentication. It's a classic rhetorical double standard.
So we have this incredibly dense forensic baseline. We've got ballistics, hearsay rules, degraded DNA, and steakhouse receipts. If the debate had stayed there, it would have been a fascinating legal seminar.
Yet it didn't stay there.
No, it derailed. Spectacularly. Let's get into the explosive flashpoints.
The temperature in that room was boiling from the start, but there was a specific moment where the dam broke. It is easily the most viral moment of the entire 3.5 hours.
The name one charge moment, I've watched the clip a dozen times, and it is just brutal. Candace is getting increasingly frustrated with Wilson. He keeps demanding this pristine, positive evidence from her, so she decides to test him. She flips the script.
And this is where she sets the trap.
Yeah. She looks at the guy who just put up $300,000 to debate the overwhelming guilt of Tyler Robinson, and she says, okay, name one charge, name one specific legal charge this guy is facing.
It's the ultimate debate trap. You stop arguing the esoteric theories, and you test the foundational knowledge of your opponent. If you were going to argue the roof is leaking, you better know what the foundation is built on.
And Wilson just confidently leans into the mic and guesses murder.
Which is legally and fundamentally incorrect in this specific case.
Candace snaps back instantly. Aggravated murder. And then, just to completely humiliate him, she proceeds to list all 7 charges from memory, totally off the cuff.
It was incredibly impressive to watch.
She says, aggravated murder, which carries the death penalty, felony discharge of a weapon, 2 counts of obstruction of justice, 2 counts of witness tampering, and violence in front of a minor.
It was a devastating rhetorical blow. By defining the exact charges and specifically noting that aggravated murder carries the death penalty, she proved to the audience that she had meticulously mastered the case docket. She knew the stakes.
And Wilson.
Wilson, by just guessing murder, looks like a guy who skimmed a Wikipedia summary 5 minutes before going live.
Yeah.
But his reaction to being corrected is what truly threw the debate into chaos.
Yeah, his ego just shatters. He immediately accuses her of cheating. He says on camera that she's being fed the answers through an earpiece or that someone is texting her the docket.
Just a total meltdown.
And Candace, without missing a single beat, literally takes her personal cell phone, slides it across the table to Patrick Bet-David, the moderator, and says, check it.
And Bet-David, to his credit as a moderator, actually does it. He scrolls through her phone live on the broadcast, he checks her messages, he checks her apps, and he confirms to the audience. There is nothing there.
Wow.
No one is feeding her answers. She just did the homework. It was a flawless victory for Owens on the optics. It visually and definitively exposed that Wilson's rigid, aggressive posture was masking a severe lack of basic preparation.
It's embarrassing, but the debate gets so much darker when they start discussing the inner circle of Turning Point USA. Early on, Wilson plays what he thinks is his absolute trump card.
Right, the text message.
He reveals a quote-unquote never-before-seen text message from Charlie Kirk to his own security team. It's dated September 9th, the literal day before he was killed.
The text is chilling, Kirk wrote. Remind them that they are there for one person's security only because I'm somewhat worried the left is trying to kill me.
Wilson drops this bomb, expecting Candace to fold. He uses it to argue that Kirk himself felt the imminent threat from a left-wing extremist like Tyler Robinson, which perfectly validates the state's ideological targeting motive.
But Candace doesn't even flinch. In fact, she takes that new piece of evidence and uses it to construct an even stronger counter-narrative. It was a masterful judo flip.
Oh, totally. What does she do?
She looks at this text and asks a question that completely shifts the gravity of the room. If Turning Point USA and Charlie's widow, Erica Kirk, had this text message proving the left was actively trying to kill him, why did they hide it from the public and the authorities for months?
Exactly. If your husband is assassinated and you have a text from him the day before saying, I think these people are going to kill me, you give that to the FBI on day one. You scream it from the rooftops.
Candace uses this suppression of evidence to bolster her theory of institutional complicity. She argues that Erica Kirk and TPUSA are actively pushing the state's lone wolf narrative.
Instead of looking for a bigger conspiracy.
Right. By hiding a text that points to a broader, organized leftist threat, Candace suggests they are protecting a specific, manageable narrative, rather than seeking the messy truth. She points out that Erica taking over the massive apparatus of TPUSA immediately after the assassination, while simultaneously enforcing this narrow lone wolf story, is deeply suspicious behavior.
And Wilson tries to jump in and defend Erica Kirk, to defend her honor, basically. But he steps on a landmine that he planted himself months ago. Candace brings up his past internet behavior.
Because long before Andrew Wilson was the 300-Aki defender of TPUSA, he was an internet troll trashing them online.
Candace points out that Wilson previously tweeted that Erica Kirk was, quote, too retarded to kill her husband.
Hearing that read aloud in a formal high-stakes debate setting is incredibly jarring. The tonal whiplash is severe.
Wait, hold on. Did he actually admit to that on the live stream?
He did. He did deny it. He tried to brush it off as being tongue-in-cheek. And then, inexplicably, instead of apologizing and moving back to the facts of the murder, he doubled down.
You're kidding.
He started making these sweeping, derogatory comments about women in leadership roles, throwing around insults about girl boss culture in reference to Erica Kirk taking over the organization.
It's just wild. You have two massive platforms sitting down to dissect the assassination of a political figure, and suddenly one of them is just unleashing misogynistic insults about the victim's widow. How does anyone take him seriously after that?
They don't. It completely alienated the audience instantly. In the eyes of the viewers, it transformed him from a rigorous forensic debater demanding positive evidence into just another abrasive internet troll.
He just totally lost the high ground.
He lost the moral high ground, which is fatal in a debate about a tragedy.
However, we do have to be fair and acknowledge the moments where Wilson's strategy actually worked. He had this catchphrase he used relentlessly, positive evidence. He must have yelled, "Where's the positive evidence?" 47 times during the broadcast.
And while his delivery was obnoxious, his underlying point was structurally sound. He pressed Candace hard on her grander alternative theories. She had posited that foreign intelligence might be involved, specifically mentioning France's Foreign Legion or Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right, and this is where Candace's factual mastery of the case docket hit a brick wall. When Wilson demanded she produce the paper trail linking Benjamin Netanyahu to Tyler Robinson, she couldn't do it.
Because it likely doesn't exist. Candace had to admit she lacked hard, positive proof of foreign ground involvement. She explicitly stated she was relying on intuition, unnamed sources, and pointing to historical threats made against Tulsi Gabbard's office as parallel examples.
She basically said, look at the pattern, trust my gut.
which is the definition of the evidence of the gaps fallacy. To Wilson's credit, he correctly identified this weakness. Just because the state's narrative has holes, like the degraded DNA, the weird CCTV inferences, or the timeline anomalies, it does not automatically mean a sprawling international syndicate is responsible.
Right, you can't just jump to the biggest possible conspiracy.
Wilson successfully exposed that while Candace's critique of the state is rigorous, her own counter-narrative relies heavily on speculation and connecting dots that might not actually be on the same page.
It's the difference between tearing down a house and building a new one. She proved the state's foundation is cracked, but she couldn't produce the blueprints for her own theory. But the way Wilson tried to capitalize on this weakness was so clumsy and rigid that it led to the most awkward moment in modern streaming history.
Oh, the 16-second silence?
Oh.
It was excruciating to watch.
So let me paint this picture for you guys listening. Wilson thinks he has Candace trapped. He's trying to execute this elaborate legal gotcha moment. He wants to play out-of-context clips of her previous podcasts, trying to bait her into saying something live that constitutes legal defamation against TPUSA or Erica Kirk.
So he tells his producers to load up a clip.
But there's a technical delay. The clip isn't ready.
And Wilson, trying to maintain total dominance, explicitly commands Candace that she is not allowed to speak until the clip plays. He tells her to sit there and be quiet.
He actually tells her to be quiet.
He tries to enforce a non-existent contract clause, claiming he has the exclusive right to question her without interruption, treating her like a hostile witness in a courtroom he controls.
And Candace just calls his bluff. She crosses her arms, sits back in her chair, and lets the dead air hang. For 16 agonizing, totally silent seconds, millions of people just watch these two stare at each other in a Nashville closet. No talking, no sound, just pure, suffocating tension.
It was a visual representation of his false bravado collapsing in real time. He created a vacuum, and he didn't know how to fill it.
And Candace, who is an absolute master marketer, later goes on her own show and calculates the math of that moment. She points out that based on the $300,000 payout for a 3.5-hour debate, she earned exactly $41,863 during those 16 seconds of sitting in silence and letting him look foolish.
That level of meta-commentary is why she dominates the modern media landscape. So to look at the mechanics of this, how does his relentless demand for pristine positive evidence regarding international geopolitics clash with his own inability to navigate the basic structure of the debate?
It's pure hypocrisy. It reveals that Wilson wasn't there as a serious legal analyst seeking the truth. He was there as a platform fighter playing a character. You cannot scream until you are blue in the face about evidentiary standards and forensic burdens of proof, while simultaneously proving you haven't read the foundational charging documents of the case you paid $300K to argue about.
It just completely undermines his position.
It's like a guy showing up to perform open heart surgery with a butter knife, screaming at the nurses that their scalpels aren't sterile enough. You just look ridiculous.
That perfectly transitions us to the fallout. Because the debate eventually ended, but the ripple effects were massive. We need to step back from the debate stage and look at the macro picture. Who actually won the war of perception, and what does it tell us about the ecosystem we are living in?
Well, if you look at the internet, it was an absolute bloodbath. Candace annihilated him in the court of public opinion. And this is where the story gets incredibly dystopian, in my opinion. During the live stream of the debate, people weren't just arguing in the chat, they were gambling.
Right, Polymarket.
Yeah, Polymarket betting odds for Tyler Robinson being convicted actually crashed during the broadcast.
Let's just pause and unpack the mechanics of that for a moment, because it is staggering. Polymarket is a decentralized prediction market where people use cryptocurrency to bet on the outcomes of real-world events.
Usually it's used for elections or sports, right?
Exactly. But here you have thousands of people placing financial wagers on whether a man will be convicted of capital murder.
And before the debate, the odds of his conviction were relatively stable. But as Candace systematically dismantled Wilson, specifically highlighting the Rule 1102 hearsay and the degraded DNA, the market reacted in real time. The odds of Tyler Robinson being convicted dropped to 34%.
We live in an era where the rhetorical performance of two influencers, arguing in a converted HVAC closet in Nashville, actively manipulates the global betting markets on a real-life homicide conviction.
That is just terrifying, honestly.
It is a staggering reflection of how decentralized media has completely usurped traditional news authorities. The public isn't waiting for a jury foreman to read a verdict. They are adjusting their financial positions based on who won a podcast argument.
The internet overwhelmingly sided with Candace, and the meme economy just went into overdrive. People were generating AI videos mocking Wilson. There was this huge viral meme called Jars Wide Shut.
Which is a deeply cut internet reference.
Yeah, explain the pickle jar thing.
It points back to an older video where Wilson, who curates this very tough, stoic alpha male persona, often smoking a cigarette on camera, was completely unable to open a basic pickle jar when challenged by a female guest on a different show.
Pickle boy. The internet is absolutely ruthless. Once you lose the intellectual high ground, they strip away everything else. And Wilson's response to getting crushed in the human polls was arguably sadder than the debate itself.
Because he went to the AI.
He couldn't accept the human feedback, so he went to an AI. He literally fed his arguments and his transcripts to the AI chatbot Claude, and then proudly tweeted that the AI declared him the winner.
The robot community loves me. It's a profound level of cognitive dissonance. He lost the human element entirely because he lacked the interpersonal skills to navigate the nuance and the gravity of a real-world tragedy.
Yeah, an AI doesn't care if you insult a widow.
Exactly. An AI evaluating raw logical syllogisms might tell him his structure was sound, but it cannot measure the catastrophic damage of insulting a widow or failing to know the basic charges.
And then there's the money. We can't forget the $300,000 bounty sitting in escrow. What happens to it?
A lot of critics, especially from the conservative media establishment, who align with Turning Point USA, demanded that Candace donate the money. They argued that profiting off a debate about an assassination was immoral.
Right. They wanted her to give it away.
They said she should give it to Tyler Robinson's legal defense fund or put it in a trust for Charlie Kirk's children.
But Candace flat out refuses, and she does it unapologetically. She calls the demands fake altruism. She points out the financial reality. Charlie Kirk's children are already multimillionaires, heavily supported by massive trusts and fundraising set up immediately after his death.
And she also addresses the political reality.
Right. She argues that TPUSA operatives actively orchestrated this hit piece against her by backing Wilson. So why on earth should she give the money back to institutions aligned with people trying to destroy her reputation?
Her decision on how to spin the payout is a masterclass in narrative control and asserting dominance. She publicly announces her ledger. She says she's keeping a chunk to take care of her sister.
Which is nice.
She is donating a significant portion to the Catholic Church, specifically naming the priests who supported her emotionally during the incredibly toxic fallout with TPUSA.
Yeah.
And then, beautifully, she announces she is taking her team to Waffle House.
The ultimate flex. Thanks for the $300K. I'm getting my hash browns scattered, smothered, and covered. Such a brilliant populist middle finger to the people who tried to trap her. But, you know, underneath all this internet theater, the memes, the AI judges, and the Waffle House victories, we have to ground ourselves back in the courtroom reality.
Because the trial's still happening.
Yes, because while influencers are throwing around $100,000 bounties and arguing over steakhouse receipts, the actual legal system in Utah is slowly, methodically grinding away.
And it is not glamorous.
Yeah.
If you sit down and actually read the court TV transcripts, it is hours and hours of pedantic procedural slog. It's not designed for viral clips.
No, it's boring legal stuff.
It's endless debates over the admissibility of David Englehart's affidavit. It's the defense attorney, Mr. Novak, painstakingly arguing case law, trying to prove that the state is introducing highly prejudicial religious opinions to secure a political targeting enhancement.
Right. I was reading the transcript, and there was a whole segment where the court literally had to shut down the proceedings and cut the live stream temporarily because a media camera accidentally broadcasted Exhibit 16 Tyler's handwritten note from under the keyboard for 3.5 seconds.
Which perfectly encapsulates the friction between these two worlds. The judicial system is obsessed with protecting the constitutional rights of the defendant and ensuring an untainted jury pool. They are terrified of premature publication. 3.5 seconds of a leaked document is a crisis.
Whereas the internet wants everything right now.
Exactly. The internet ecosystem demands absolute transparency, raw data, and instant conclusions. The internet treats leaked evidence as content to be monetized, while the court treats it as a hazardous material that must be carefully contained.
So when we pull back from all of this, what is the final verdict? Did Candace's intense preparation win the crowd? Or did Wilson's narrow evidentiary demands successfully expose the limits of her conspiracy theories?
I think the verdict is overwhelmingly clear. Candace Owens won the war of perception through sheer, brute force, factual mastery of the case docket. She knew the names of the investigating officers, she knew the specific 7 charges, she understood the ballistics, and she identified the timeline anomalies.
She totally controlled the flow of information.
Yes, Wilson correctly identified the structural weakness in her grander geopolitical theories. She lacked direct, positive proof of foreign state involvement, but he completely failed to capitalize on it because he was fundamentally unprepared on the basics of the case.
You just can't skip the basics.
You cannot dismantle a complex conspiracy theory if you don't even know the name of the crime the suspect is charged with.
Exactly. It just proves that in this arena, homework beats bravado every single time. You can have the loudest voice and the deepest pockets, but if you don't read the docket, you are going to get slaughtered by someone who did.
That is the ultimate takeaway here.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Let's go back to that idea we talked about at the top, the crime scene without the yellow tape.
The open source investigation.
We just spent the last hour breaking down a $300,000 gladiatorial match fought over the microscopic real-world details of a horrific national tragedy. And it leaves you with this lingering, really uncomfortable question.
What's that?
Well, we live in an era where literally anyone with a microphone and a Wi-Fi connection can publicly audit a homicide investigation in real time. Millions of people will watch, and betting markets will shift based on what they say. So where exactly is the line?
That is the real issue.
Where is the boundary between vital, independent truth-seeking that holds corrupt institutions accountable and simply turning a real-life assassination into a highly profitable content farm?
It is the defining media question of our time, and it definitely doesn't have an easy answer.
No, it doesn't. There's no yellow tape left to guide us. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep asking the hard questions, stay curious, and always, always critically evaluate your sources. We'll see you next time.